Museums are magic places. They can take you back into history or forward into an artist's imagination in just a few steps. This is the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. There are many worlds to explore at the National Gallery. You can imagine yourself to be almost anywhere. You have centuries to choose from. You can be in any mood. You can be any age. There is something wonderful here for everyone. I'm Julie Harris. I love to come here. Art is always an adventure for me. It makes me see people and places with new eyes. There was no such thing as a public art museum 200 years ago. The only people who could explore art were the people who owned it. Sometimes in the gallery, I imagine that I'm walking in my own house. Well, in a way, it is mine, and yours too. All of this belongs to all of us. I've picked some special things in the gallery to show you today. Each one has something quite important to tell you. Art just doesn't happen, you see. It isn't created out of nowhere. Art reflects its own time, and it changes with time and taste, just as you and I do. Great artists bring their own ideas and feelings and experiences to art too, and so do you. If you're like me, you like some things better than others. But before you make up your mind, there are a few things to look for in any work of art. They help you to understand what you see and enjoy it more. So come with me, and I'll show you what I mean. This is the National Gallery's newest masterpiece, a building no less, by I.M. Pei, a gift from the Andrew Mellon family and foundation. It's like an enormous piece of modern sculpture. It surrounds you with sensations of movement and constant change. It's as multifaceted and full of new ideas as our world is today. And so is this fantastic tapestry, Woman. Joan Miro created her for this wall. Isn't she stunning? She weighs 22 times more than I do. I don't think you will recognize yourself mirrored in her any more than I do, but from her head to her feet, she is a perfect reflection of the 20th century. You can see several sides of her head at the same time. She's made of simple, abstract forms. She's flat, and her coloring is curious. Joan Miro was born in Spain in 1893. Before he was even 10 years old, the X-ray, the wireless telegraph, Freud's interpretation of dreams, Einstein's theory of relativity had appeared. So how could any artist working in our time believe we're simply what we appear to be? If we want to see that, we can take a photograph. We have more options than we ever had. We're freer to choose than we ever were. For 20th century artists, that freedom means expression, fantasy, abstraction. Leonardo da Vinci is one of the greatest geniuses of all time. 500 years ago, he painted this portrait of Ginevra da Vinci. She is so real, you can almost feel the softness of her skin. Simply beautiful. Ginevra's father was a wealthy and powerful Florentine merchant. In their day, everyone, especially Leonardo, was interested in things which were natural, human. Ginevra's portrait shows that. But it doesn't show why she was so melancholy. Something must have been wrong. Leonardo said that portraits should show the motions of the mind. And you can see how he's emphasized the pallor of Ginevra's calm, intelligent, sad face. There is a theory. At 16, Ginevra had married a widower twice her age. She had no children, a great misfortune in those days. She had been ill for some time, and she was suffering from the breakup of an unhappy love affair. Poor Ginevra. I suppose we'll never be sure. But we do know she was so beautiful and so good that even the ruler Lorenzo de' Medici wrote sonnets to her. Ginevra wrote poetry herself. All that's left is one line. I am a tiger. I am a tiger. I see what she means. It's a long way from that classic beauty to this huge, fantastic dancing lady. How did it happen? Let's investigate. This painting is the Adoration of the Magi. There they all are, the three wise men of the Bible, kneeling before the Virgin and Child on a carpet of flowers as decorative as a medieval tapestry. A traditional nativity scene. This magnificent circular painting is a visual detective story. There are all sorts of clues here to show you what happens to art when the world moves from one kind of time to another. It is a colorful bridge between the world of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance world. Two monks painted this in the early 15th century. One was so gentle and devout, he was nicknamed Fra Angelico, angelic brother. The other, Fra Filippo Lippi, had a more worldly temperament. He finally was allowed to withdraw from his order and marry. The worldly and the spiritual. In a way, they epitomize the time. Some things seem strange to our 20th century eyes, don't they? Why is such a huge peacock perched on the roof of such an oddly shaped stable? Why is everyone crowded layer on layer right up to the top of the picture instead of back into it? It's because this picture is still full of symbols and techniques of the Middle Ages. The peacock represented immortality then. The halos were symbols of divinity. That hasn't changed, I guess. The dog meant faithfulness. The church had shaped people's lives, thoughts, and art for centuries. Artists were just learning how to paint a three-dimensional, real world with depth and volume. The world was beginning to look like a more interesting place than heaven. People learned from scholars and poets that man had been at the center of the stage in ancient times, so that's where he wanted to be again, when this wonderful painting was finished. And man is still taking all the curtain calls. Artists bring their own ideas and feelings and experiences to art too. They see differently from you and me sometimes. Some see far ahead, and it takes us time to catch up. How up to date are your eyes? This picture outraged people when they first saw it in Paris in 1864. Edward Manet's Dead Toreador. Do you see anything scandalous about it? It seems hard to believe now that the public and leaders of the French art world were horrified by the subject matter, terribly upset by the flat shapes and strong color contrasts. They were so critical that when Manet took the picture back, he cut it into 3 pieces. This is one of them. People felt the same about Manet's Old Musician. They just weren't ready to accept Manet's realism. They didn't want to see shabby people like these. They were used to sleek pictures of heroes from history or mythology. Artists painted that way or else in Paris. It was more important to Manet to paint what he saw around him and how he saw it, even though people ridiculed him. His conviction that art and artists should be free makes him a crucial figure in modern art. You know, Manet said something interesting long ago. People living 100 years from now will be happy. Their vision will be so much more highly developed than ours. They will see so much more clearly. How good a prophet was he? Lavender Mist. Jackson Pollock painted it in New York in 1950. He was a legend by the time he died, just a few years later in an automobile accident. Some of you still may not be sure what to make of it. That's understandable. It is totally abstract. There is not one form in it we can recognize. There's no fixed point to help our eyes begin. Pollock was as controversial as Manet when he began to paint this way, but it didn't take nearly as long for people to realize how good he was. He opened up a new world of possibilities for painters. He used a revolutionary technique. For centuries, Western artists have propped their canvases up on easels or against walls. Not Pollock. He dripped, flung, or swirled paint onto a sheet of canvas laid on the floor. He would move around and around the canvas, paint can in one hand, leaning far over it, sometimes even stepping on it, applying the paint with both ends of the brush. His whole body painted. He must have been marvelous to watch. You can see what fabulous control Pollock had. There is no accident, he said. Look at the patterns of line and color. They're all carefully planned and balanced. The white lines are thin. The black lines are heavy. Pollock forces your eyes to keep moving. There's tremendous energy and variety here, and such delicate colors. Pollock gave some advice once to people who asked him how to look at his painting, and all modern art, like Beasts of the Sea by Henri Matisse. Try to receive what the painting has to offer, he said. I think it should be enjoyed just as music is enjoyed. After a while, you may like it or you may not. At least give it a chance. Joshua Johnston painted these little boys in 1807. He was an extraordinary artist. Johnston was the first important black artist in the United States. He was born about 1770, and we think he had been a slave. Johnston's painting is naive in comparison with Pollock's and Manet's, but he's a wonderful painter too. We think he purchased his freedom with portraits like this. Johnston developed a distinctive style. This is characteristic. If I know something about the artists themselves, I think it makes looking more fun. In the 17th century, the Dutch were prosperous and powerful and pleased with themselves. They loved pictures of themselves and still lifes like this vase of flowers. Let's take a closer look at it. Sometimes we hurry past things we know without really seeing them. You can miss an awful lot in a museum that way. This is so realistic. There is even a tiny reflection of a window in the vase. But look some more. Do you really think in a spotless Dutch house you'd find a snail, a lizard, and a spider crawling around together on a marble tabletop? And why did the artist put in the same vase flowers which couldn't possibly have been in bloom at the same time? What was he getting at? This painting is full of symbols the Dutch found so interesting. To them, the caterpillar and the butterfly signified death and rebirth. The flowers meant that we would all fade and die eventually. Do you see now why I wanted you not to rush? I'm always surprised at what I find in any painting if I take the time. These people certainly seem to have found something interesting. I'm tempted right now to introduce this next painting by saying Jaws of 1778. This is Watson and the Shark by John Singleton Copley, a great early American artist. What a subject for a painter. He's organized it so we feel we're in the front seat of the movie. In the foreground, the monster returns for a second attack on the struggling boy, Watson. Then up in a desperate diagonal of horrified sailors to the man with the lifeline Watson has missed. Then down sharply on the other side of the pyramid with the boat hook that may not kill the shark in time. Will Watson be devoured or saved? Copley broke the rules of his day by using a story about ordinary men. But everyone loved it. They knew there was a happy ending. Watson was rescued and lived to become Lord Mayor of London. It's miraculous to me how artists can capture a single moment forever on a simple piece of flat canvas with a few paints and brushes. They make me feel I'm sharing that very moment in the lives of the people in these pictures. Long after I've left the gallery, they keep living in my mind. Now, let's see how artists do these magic tricks. It's important to see how an artist arranges things, puts parts of a picture together, as in this Madonna by Raphael. The composition of a work has a powerful and instant impact on you. So does the sense of movement you get from the particular kind of line an artist uses. Lines can contain a picture, or balance it, or move it. There's a wonderful sense of speed and space here in Winslow Homer's painting. Everything's on the same diagonal line, leaning to the left. The rudder, the masts, the sails. The curves of the sailors' bodies move to the left, too. You just know it's breezing up off Gloucester 100 years ago. The man who painted this had to be a fight fan. George Bellows, an American artist, went to this very bout himself in 1909 in New York. He chose the climactic moment, just before the knockout. He's made us feel we're right in the smoke-filled arena. The triangle of bloody, glistening fighters towers over us in the ring. The winner lunges from the right for the knockdown. You just know the poor fighter on the left is about to crumble in defeat. Everything is jagged and angular. Light and shade are used very dramatically by Bellows here, too. That's another thing to look good. That's over. This is a more agreeable subject to tell you about some of the other tools artists use to create their effects. Portraits with individual character like Cranach's Young Princess appeared first in the early Renaissance. Before that, portraits symbolized people's status. This is Saskia van Oulenburg. Her husband-to-be painted this contented and confident portrait shortly before their wedding in 1634. He was Rembrandt van Rijn, the great Dutch artist. He adored Saskia. All his life, in the hundreds of portraits Rembrandt painted, he used light and shadow in this dramatic and expressive way. It's a crucial tool to create mood, to give character to shapes and spaces. Poor Saskia. She died 7 years later. We have no idea who this young girl is, but it really doesn't matter. She's charming, and that was the whole point of portraits when Fragonard painted her in Paris in 1776. He wasn't interested in her character, but he was interested in light. That was as important to Fragonard as it was to Rembrandt. He used it like sunshine, Rembrandt like a spotlight. There's another thing here to notice, how he used the same line inside the picture to create a feeling of grace and rhythm. You can trace the delicately curving line of her chin everywhere. In her dress, her bodice, her finger, her pillow. The only straight lines I can find are the armrest and the wall behind her. Soon after this, the French Revolution caused the death, ruin, or exile of many of Fragonard's wealthy patrons. He survived by the skin of his teeth and died in 1806 without a penny. This is by one of the best women artists of the 19th century, Berthe Morisot. She was the grandniece of Fragonard and the sister-in-law of Manet. Doesn't something seem strange to you, though? Look at the striking contrast between the two figures. Berthe's sister is so light and fresh. Her mother is so much darker and heavier. We know why. One day, Berthe asked Manet for his opinion. Not only did he give it, he picked up a brush and worked for 4 hours on the portrait of Berthe's mother. She was annoyed, but she could do nothing by then. A messenger was waiting to take the picture to an exhibition. It's useful for us, though. In one painting, you can see two artists' work and compare their use of light and color and shape. Morisot was an impressionist. She was fascinated by the play of light on objects. So was Auguste Renoir. He and Morisot were good friends. Impressionists had a special philosophy of life, as well as a theory of light. The earth as a paradise of the gods. That's what I want to paint, was Renoir's view. And this is how he painted light, small strokes of glowing colors to catch the changing sunlight. This picture makes me feel good right away. It's spontaneous and innocent. Colors always affect your response to a painting. These are direct and simple. They take your eyes right to the action. I also love the way the bareback riders seem to float in the air. And the horse, too. And look at the marvelous details. W.H. Brown was an American primitive artist of the late 19th century. He wanted to paint a real live circus, but he didn't quite know how. He taught himself. That's why his shapes are flat, two-dimensional. They look like paper cutouts. The figures are rigid and frozen, even when they're in motion. No matter. He's caught the excitement of the circus. Now this artist knew how to do everything. Pablo Picasso. He painted these wandering acrobats in 1905. You can test the effect of color again. What a somber mood. Here Picasso's colors are subdued and subtle. They help your eyes move quietly around these unhappy, isolated people. We think the Harlequin figure is the painter himself. Picasso was one of the greatest artists who ever lived. He gave us a radically new and different way to look at the world, and our eyes will never be the same because of the way he saw things. You know how much I love Emily Dickinson. She wrote a poem I think of when I come here to the National Gallery to see all these wonderful works of art. Beauty crowds me till I die. Beauty, mercy have on me, but if I expire today, let it be in sight of thee. I hope you've enjoyed this adventure in art with me today. Perhaps I'll see you here again.